Welcome back. New home sales dropped 6.6% in June from the month prior, a huge miss on consensus estimates that expected them to actually increase by more than 3.5%. We're joined now by Glynn, Zillow's senior managing economist. So, Chris, these new home sales figures really disappointed. A huge miss, as I just mentioned, from some of those estimates. I'm curious to know why you think there was a drop at this time, especially as we've been seeing the U.S. housing market really heating up with so many folks essentially engaging in these bidding wars to purchase homes.
I think the first thing to do is take a step back and look at this number in a broader historical context. This would be the highest number pre-pandemic in terms of new home sales dating back to 2007. So by any measure, pre-pandemic, these would be very strong home sales numbers. Now, you talked about why this might be happening. We see that builders are, quite frankly, facing some of the same supply chain challenges that many industries are facing in terms of windows and appliances, and they're having to be more flexible in terms of scheduling and timing to get projects done.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there's a couple different ways of looking at it. If you wanted to dig into the numbers that way, and people might try and figure out what the weakness was in this particular month reading. And I suppose people could turn to higher mortgage rates, right? And we've debated whether or not that actually matters on the fringe for some of these buyers looking to hop in now. I mean, how big of a signal to you is that we might just, be hitting peak housing prices here and there's not much enthusiasm to go much higher?
Home value appreciation has been at record-setting paces in recent months. And so, interest rates and affordability, which are both connected, have been a challenge for some buyers making that transition into home ownership. But we also have to think about where we are in the position of the pandemic, coming out of an 18-month stretch that's been unprecedented. And so maybe buyers are taking a vacation in June for the first time since the pandemic began in early 2020, and home buying hasn't been their primary focus. So I think there could be numerous explanations for why today's numbers are lower than expected.
Do you think that this could be perhaps the beginning of a trend? I think when we talk about the housing market, so many folks had floated out the phrase of a bubble. When would it burst? A lot of these questions. Do you think that this downtick, even though, as you mentioned, in context, still incredibly strong figures, at least that we're seeing in some of these sales, but could this be the beginning of a downward trend that we're going to see throughout the second half of the year?
There's still a lot of strong sentiment out there. And in June, we saw builders increase new construction starts by 6%. So clearly builders believe that there's a lot of demand out there. And that demand is coming from a few different places. The first is, very low mortgage rates, as you mentioned earlier. Mortgage rates are back down to below 3, and that's bringing buyers in off the sidelines. The second is generational dynamics, where we have both seniors and millennials that are active in the housing market, millennials aging into home ownership years for the first time. And the third is what we call the great reshuffling, where households are able to reevaluate their housing needs in light of COVID-19 and perhaps move to find a place that's slightly more affordable or better meets their housing needs.
Yeah, and when you look at it, I mean, I suppose it's been kind of the back and forth we've seen of people maybe moving out of city centers to farther and farther suburbs. And we were just having a discussion of companies bringing workers back now. So, I mean, now would seem like an inflection point if we are moving back into the quote unquote new normal here. I mean, when you look at it regionally, are there any, sectors, pieces of the country out there that you still see as strong, even if that trend is to reverse? Maybe, I don't know, San Francisco, ones that stand out to me as tech lags behind and getting back into the office here.
We think of the housing market as one collective market, but it's really, as you pointed out, a collection of thousands of individual and hyper-local markets. So in San Francisco and New York, where we actually did see meaningful changes in the suburbs and the urban core, we're starting to see that recover. And places like Austin and Phoenix, Sunbelt areas, which attracted incredible demand and migration throughout the pandemic because of year-round warm weather and housing affordability, those places continue to grow rapidly.
So then if you had to really create a narrative, for the housing market moving forward, especially as, you just mentioned, we saw that flight to the suburbs, some folks now returning back to the cities, at least that's true here in New York. What do you think that narrative is going to be, at least in terms of the U.S. housing market going forward?
The housing market has proven itself to be very resilient and robust throughout the pandemic. We think that affordability is a challenge that we need to pay attention to. and that demand will continue to be strong from a variety of sources, including millennials and seniors, but that we really need to think about supply as well. And this new construction number adding supply to the market, that's very important.
All right, Chris Glynn, Zillow Senior Managing Economist, appreciate you coming on here to chat with us today. We'll see if that trend plays out, what this is in terms of the larger storyline. Appreciate you coming on here to chat today.